So as you guys know, I talked about reliable bikes quite often because that's one of the things I value about motorcycles. I, like a lot of people in the United States anyway, didn't get into motorcycling because for the sport of it. I got into it because I needed reliable transportation to get to work in DC. So for me, having a motorcycle that doesn't break down is probably one of the most important things. I like the idea of keeping a motorcycle for a very long time and not break down. And the bikes that I mentioned in the last video that were unreliable, there's a lot of data to support it. Even if you don't take my opinion, there's still too much data to point out that BMW, Ducati, Harley, and Triumph are historically a lot less reliable and durable than the Japanese offerings. Said that BMW does not engineer things well. I know that Germans have this reputation for engineering, but I've never been impressed with German engineering. And they make things way too complex, more complex than it has to be. And it appeals to a certain type of person. Generally, it's a old, white male that it appeals to. And I kind of like bikes that be a little bit peppier. This VStrom is extremely peppy. It doesn't have a lot of power. It doesn't have as much power as a BMW with 1200 cc's. But this thing will surprise a lot of BMWs. I think what's interesting about a lot of motorcycle riders is that they attach their feelings to their bikes. So if you criticize their bikes, they get bent all out of shape. Look, listen, if you get insulted because I don't like your BMW, maybe you should join a BMW Lovin conference where you can be with like-minded people and both of you, all you guys can like stroke your backs and caress yourselves. I am not interested in being with like-minded people. I actually prefer people to be critical of things because that's how you make improvements. And yeah, you know, this bike, this VStrom 650, as much as I like it, it's not perfect. But I don't get bent out of shape when people like criticize me. Like, don't live your life with your feelings attached to a motorcycle. It's such a pathetic way to live. And I often have met a lot of these guys, you know, they spend $20,000 on a Ducati or Harley, and they think that because they spent that amount of money on a Harley, that means that other people are going to like it as much as they do. I had a couple of touring bikes, ST1300, ST1100, and they were great bikes for commuting, but the problem with them, they were very large, very comfortable for the winter, but the problem is you couldn't lane split in them. They were too big for DC streets. DC streets are very narrow, and they were definitely not as maneuverable, and keep in mind that they had limited suspension, so you were constantly had to be a little bit more careful with them. And the ST1300, for example, it was a lot of Tupperware, that is plastic everywhere, and when you have plastic, that means that it's a lot harder to do maintenance on it if you remove all the plastic. This thing, I think my bike right now is at 60-something thousand, and I think it's really because I started to do a lot of touring and stuff on it. But normally, I don't think I usually don't keep bikes for more than 70,000 miles. I've kept a few. I had a ST1100, and that had 120,000 miles, and still worked. The ST1300, I think I had 60,000. The R1 had 74,000 or something crazy like that. You have a lot more suspension, so when you're riding around and you hit potholes in the city while commuting, it's nothing. On a VStrom, you just go right through the potholes. The suspension, the big wheels help so much to go over it. And those speed bumps that you have in the cities, you can just go right over them and you don't have to slow down. And it's even better on a KTM Adventure with even more suspension and the bigger front wheel. But that's one thing. And of course, then you have very wide handlebars that make it so much easier to throw the bike around, because when you're riding around in the city and commuting, you need to kind of throw the bike around because you're constantly dodging traffic. And that's the name of the game. Also, on adventure bikes, you have really good wind protection. And another thing that I really like is you can see out the mirrors. On a sport bike, it's very difficult to see out the mirrors when you are commuting. You see a lot of your shoulder. But on this VStrom, on one mirror, I can see almost directly behind me without having any blind spots. Having a upright seating position like this helps out quite a bit too, because you don't have to be hunched over like a sport bike and then turning your neck. It kind of crimps your neck out. If you have a upright seating position, it's much more comfortable. Oh, ladies. Comfortable for commuting because you can see so much better over cars, especially SUVs. You can kind of see a little bit over it. And on a sport bike, you are a little bit lower and it's harder to see. Visibility is not great. So turning your neck and your torso for looking over and stuff like that is much easier on an adventure bike. And also the tires on adventure bikes last a lot longer than a sport bike. So not only that, you're saving money by the amount of time you can keep tires, and the tires on adventure bikes are generally cheaper. Sport bike tires for commuting, man, I was doing 5,000 miles on an R1 and wearing those tires out just so quickly. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, adventure bikes are very easy to maintain. A lot of them don't have a lot of plastic, so the plastic is very easy to remove. And a VStrom like this is very easy to maintain, and it never is in the shop. Now, you can get other bikes that require more maintenance, like BMWs, Ducati Hyper Motards, and stuff like that. Super Motards also make great commuters, but for me, having something like this makes the most sense. 20 years ago, they were called Big Traily, so they changed their names to kind of help with marketing a bit. Big Trailies to adventure bikes. Yeah, of course, who wouldn't want to have an adventure bike? It sounds so much cooler. But a lot of it is the image. You know, the VStrom is definitely more of a road bike, but what you get out of a VStrom is so much better than just having an adventure bike with hardcore geometry and a very light frame. So having a steel frame like this makes a lot of sense for adventure bikes. Man, everybody's out today on a bicycle. What I'm saying, squids, is don't get bent out of shape. When somebody criticizes your bike, just move on. What you guys need to do is just ride instead of pouting about some guy on the internet not liking your motorcycle. It's kind of pathetic of you. Alright guys, I hope you enjoy my ranting about reliability in bikes, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.